Before we talk about the work of humans, we want to talk about the work of God. Because the work of us as God's people, as image bearers, is always responding to the initial and first work of God. And when you open up the Bible, the first thing you see on page 1, in sentence 1 of the Bible, is that God is a worker. That in the beginning he created. And this is a scandalous thing. It's scandalous because the Near Eastern conceptions of the gods of that day and their creation myths were that the gods were not workers. The gods were intended to relax, and that work was below them, and so they created people specifically to be their slaves and do the hard work, but some people could rise to the high status of being like lord over people and being kind of like the gods and not having to work, and that work didn't have dignity. But the scandalous thing that God does in the creation narrative is it starts by describing God as a worker who creates a masterpiece of the world over 6 days, and every delightful thing that we've encountered comes from him. And as you scan the pages of Genesis and also the whole of Scripture, you begin to see what kind of worker God is. He's the great architect who perfectly designs the world with both function and beauty. Just look at a tree, giving you oxygen so that you can breathe and fresh air, but also giving you food and shade and beauty. God's the great architect of all of those things. He's the great construction worker who actually builds the world, as verse 6 uses the words of a craftsman. Not just the distant architect, but the construction worker who gets his hands dirty. God's the great interior designer who creates the full spectrum of colors and paints them across skies and flowers and people. He's the great auditor and quality control manager who looks over all of creation, sustaining it and declaring that it is good. He's the great entrepreneur whose enterprise called creation is more sustainable and constantly creating value than anything that ever came out of Silicon Valley. You think it's impressive to make a solar panel or a solar airplane. Try making the sun. God is the farmer before all farmers, whose original work comes before every morsel of food that you ever enjoyed. He's the great landscaper who fills the world with shrubs and evergreen trees and stones and beautifully arranges them and separates them to make the world delightful. He's the pioneer of the hospitality industry, that before humans were even around, he made a world in which we could flourish. God is the great administrative assistant who he doesn't just keep our calendar, but he actually made the calendar as he ordered time and made the sun to come up at certain times and go down, and the uniqueness of seasons, so with the predictability of time. He's the great manager who didn't just make things and leave them alone, but who constantly watches over them as the Holy Spirit hovers over the face of the earth and keeps them running. He is the great teacher who is the source of all wisdom and knowledge. He is the one who orchestrates the history that you read in the history books. He's the great parent as the ultimate father from whom we learn. And he is the ultimate general contractor who will one day renew and restore all that's broken in the world. And because God is so good, and because God is a worker, as his image bearers, when we take our work seriously, whether it's volunteer or our employment, and we do it well and we do it with excellence, it creates an echo, a glimpse, a portrait of what God is like. There's something amazing about good work. that gets you kind of amped up. Give me some examples of good work you've encountered. Just like one sentence.
A great website.
A great website, absolutely.
Beautiful symphony.
Beautiful symphony.
Delicious Thai food.
Delicious Thai food, yeah.
Good coffee.
Good coffee, yeah.
Good basketball.
Good basketball, yeah. Yeah, these things, there's something aesthetically good about them that we experience them and we just say, ooh, that's right. And the part of us that's saying, ooh, that's right, is the part of us that's delighting in God, in the beauty and excellence that he embedded in creation. And that we, as his image bearers, who've been called to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth and subdue it, to have dominion. In other words, work came before the fall. We're called to put God on display through the good work that we do. One of the examples of this is one of the architects in our city. His name's Jack. And he fills the city with good buildings that he gives thought to the view that's going out of every window. And he will edit trees in and out by the way he makes windows. And he stewards the heat that we have by using certain materials that allow the building to be cooled, and the use of trees and everything like that. And you see throughout the city the creativity of God on display. You see the order of God on display. You see beauty. You see protection as he makes it structurally sound. But also you have Joseph's coat painting. A group of guys who they went through Surge a couple of years ago, and they own, in particular this guy, Brian Brown, who owns this company, this painting company. And at first he actually thought that it was kind of below him to be working as a painter. He was in the military and he got back and he just started working at his dad's company before he landed on his feet, and then he kind of took it over. But then once he saw that God is a worker, he began to reshape what he was doing to put God on display through the way that they work. And so it became their mission to display the protection of God as they put coats of paint that protect the buildings from wear and tear, to display the beauty of God by picking the finest paints that magnify the God who created blue. They decided that they were going to put God on display in the city through the way that they serve, and I'll talk about that, and the way that they do their work with excellence and faithfulness and consistency, showing the God who is the same God day in, day out. And so they're in many ways dramatizing what God's character through their work. But furthermore, when you see there's an explicit call in Genesis 1 and 2 to work, but there's also this implicit call. And I love this. It's implicit in this. It's what did God not make in the beginning? iPhones, exactly. Adam and Eve did not show up to a ready-made world where there was a taco stand and soccer balls and a university. But God actually showed restraint in not making everything that would ever be made in that moment. He's still the one who makes it, but he chooses to make it through human hands as they develop and cultivate the potential of the world. They draw it out. And as you draw out the potential that God has hidden in creation through your work, you're filling the world with wonder. Little secrets that God hid in the world of his beauty and of his majesty and of his good creativity. We draw that out through good work. What do I mean by that? I mean that it is very good. A maple tree is very good. But when put in human hands and given the call to cultivate a maple tree, and you pull out the maple syrup from that thing and pour it over some pancakes, it becomes very good. and you see the potential of maple syrup that God hid inside the maple tree, or the maple wood as you make a guitar. And you steward the way that he made sounds to work together, to harmonize together, to make something good, or to build a home that protects you from the elements that would otherwise you'd be frozen to death, right? So it's protective. And so finding the potential that God hid in creation, as you work, you are developing it and cultivating it. And as it is put on display, it's giving people a little foretaste of God and what the fullness of his kingdom will be like. I'll tell you one story of one of the best examples I saw of this. We actually had a crack in the beam of our house. And in this house that we had a couple years ago. And I didn't think much of it because I'm not very observant apparently. But it was right over where my daughter played, so I thought maybe I should check it out. When I checked it out, I brought in all these contractors and they were going to take a look at it, and they all gave the same diagnosis. It was this. Someone replaced this load-bearing wall. They took a load-bearing wall out of your house. They were amateurs. They did poor work. The whole weight of your house is on these little like 2x4s here. And it's going to break one day and come crashing down on you. So therefore, pay up. And they all gave us their quotes and everything, and they used a lot of fear with us. But there was one contractor who came, and that contractor, he basically said the same thing that they said, but he said it was a little different. He said, listen, I am going to build a load-bearing wall, or I'm going to build a temporary wall here and now. I'm not asking you permission. I'm telling you, I'm going to build a temporary wall. You do not have to pay me for your time. You do not have to pay me for the materials, and you don't have to go with me as your contractor. But I, in good conscience, cannot leave this house knowing that you guys are in danger. So he goes and he gets the wood and he starts building this wall. And like, seriously, did not ask for permission. He just started building a wall in our house. And as I was talking to him as he's doing it, it became very clear that this guy was telling me about Jesus. And he's like starting to share the gospel with me. And so I asked him, like, what church you go to? And it turns out he actually goes to one of the congregations of my church, but since we're at different congregations, I'd never met him before, right? But that was the day that someone's work was so excellent and so displayed the protective and providential nature of God that he almost led his pastor to Christ again, because he was like, I was that amped up. But if our cities and our communities are filled with the intentionality of good work like that, people will start seeing glimpses of what God is like, and will begin asking, what is so unique about this good work? And I've heard someone say this before, I really like it. Your work will never be a platform for evangelism until it's more than a platform for evangelism. Yeah. Until you are doing good work with excellence. But then when you do that, people will see the glimpse of God in your good work and begin to salivate for it. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to take your area of mission focus. And I have on the bottom of the page here a list of God's attributes. And I want you, with a group of about 3 people, share what it would look like. Brainstorm some ways that you could put those aspects of God's character on display through good work in your particular area of mission focus. So, what does it look like to display the creativity of God in your area of mission focus? What does it look like to display his provision or his restoration or his faithfulness? sacrificial love of Christ. And we go and put that on display. It's displaying